All right, revenue leaders, today we're diving straight into the underworld of SaaS sales, the side nobody talks about enough. Channel partnerships with no base salary, identity governance that makes or breaks deals, and why your SDR is probably out earning your account executive. This isn't your dad's sales strategy, it's Revenue Unplugged. Real talk, real tactics, real frameworks. With me today is Connor Andersen, VP of Worldwide Sales and Channels at Zluri. He's scaling a global go-to-market motion at the intersection of cybersecurity, identity, and SaaS management. Before Zluri, he was in the trenches at Vectra AI, Darktrace during its IPO run, and Proofpoint, helping cyber orgs punch above their weight through partnerships. Connor's not just a go-to-market leader, he's a channel whisperer, a messaging sniper, and one of the only people who will say out loud, sometimes the SDR makes more than the AE, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. So let's go. Connor, as we dive in, what did I miss? Where your background, your experience, what should we know about you?
I think it's just all of the mistakes and failures and banging your head along the way, right? I feel like I'm fairly vocal and opinionated, but it usually comes from not the wins, but the mistakes or the lessons or things I've learned through some of the failures. So, yeah, I think that part gets left out sometimes. I feel like everyone talks about their highlights or everything's always up and to the right. And as you know, startups are not usually always up and to the right, even if that's what the board meetings show.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I've learned over time, even if people are open about it, a lot of times the audience doesn't appreciate in their mind, like, well, you just knew it was going to work out. And in the back of your head, like you're never quite sure. Um, so let's set the stage. Give us the 60-second version. What's the actual growth charter that you own at Zluri?
Yeah. So I have all of the GTM functions. So everything from sales, marketing, the SDR team, into the channels and kind of the revenue operations functions. So we're early stage, right? We're a Series B startup here. So we have our product and our R&D teams. We've got the finance and legal G&A side of the business, and then we've got the GTM side, which is kind of where I look after.
And for the audience who doesn't know, where does Zluri sit in the market? What do you guys do, and for whom? What are you selling?
Yeah, so we're an identity security platform. We fall into cybersecurity is a bunch of 3 and 4 letter soup acronym type stuff. So we're in the IGA space, which stands for Identity Governance and Administration. Basically, you have a ton of different SaaS applications you use to do your job. Who has access to what? Should they have access? Do they need admin level access or just role level? Right? All of this different type of stuff. Right? Your Zoom. Are you in the Zoom license that gives you above 40 minutes or below 40 minutes? Right? Our platform helps security and IT teams manage all of that. Everything from Salesforce to Workday to Okta to OneDrive, all of the different SaaS, Adobe Creative Cloud, right? There's thousands of applications out there. We're kind of the operating system that people use to secure and feel comfortable with all of that, those software applications.
And how long have you been leading growth at Zluri?
Just over a year. Yeah, just hit
Okay.
my year mark.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where what attracted you to the company? Like, what was interesting about joining the organization for you?
Yeah, so we're at an interesting time within IT and security. And the question I always like to ask people is, does the CIO report to the CISO or the CISO report to the CIO? I don't know. It kind of depends, right? Those roles are really merging together. Um, and so identity is kind of this interesting thing of, does the IT team own identity or does the security team own identity? So it becomes I use the Spider-Man reference a lot where they're all kind of standing in a circle, all kind of pointing fingers at each other and no one really gets it. That is kind of the challenge around identity right now. And so it's a very happening place to be. In identity, we like to say that like, it's never like the hottest market, but it's always like around the hottest market because understanding who has access. So today it might be Gen AI tools. That's great. But who has access to that? Right? How do people get access to that? Right? It could have been cloud tools or endpoint tools or different things like that. But we're always like right there. So you get to be a part of like very interesting conversations. A lot of the conversations I have with CISOs right now are around how do we control all of the different Gen AI applications that are popping up everywhere? And my favorite thing to ask is, do you have an AI policy? And everyone raises their hand. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I'm like, cool. How do you enforce that policy? And it's crickets. And so that's something that like we can help with. But it's a very interesting and fun conversation to be a part of. So that kind of journey, I knew the Lightspeed team. So Lightspeed kind of led the Series B here. And so I knew that team. They've got a great reputation within security, but just within SaaS broadly. And so being able to work closely with some of those board members and investors, that was an important kind of maturation for my career. And so that was also like very interesting to me.
When you set the stage, where was the organization when you joined, and what was your like what how had they gotten to where they'd gotten? Like what were the motions that existed to get there, and
Yeah.
what was your charge?
Yeah. So it's probably one of the most interesting things. Zluri was founded back in 2020. Flashback to 2020, pandemic times, nobody was traveling. You weren't visiting your customers in person. Um, and if you looked at it, most CEOs and board members were trying to figure out how do we save money, right? Revenues were iffy. You didn't know if you were going to have it. You didn't know what was going to happen. So a lot of people were, if you looked at a P&L, right, usually the three most expensive things are kind of your employee salaries, office leases, and software spend. So people were trying not to fire people. People were already giving up their office lease. And so we're like, hey, that third problem, that software spend, that's what we're going to tackle. So it started in 2020 in India, in South India, in Bangalore, focused on how do we help IT teams manage and kind of save money on all of their software subscriptions. So they built this big discovery engine to be able to integrate and discover all the shadow IT and shadow SaaS and all these types of things. And that was incredible. So the way I like to explain it is early on, imagine you've never had anybody come and clean your house. You've never cleaned your house before. And then you pay somebody to come over and they pull out the fridge, they get behind the fridge, they do the baseboards, they do the blinds, they do everything. And they ask you for $500. You're like, best $500 you've ever spent. You give them $500 and you're like, I'm never cleaning the house again. Incredible. Then they come back in a week and they just kind of lightly dust. And then they ask you for $500 again. You kind of feel like you got ripped off a little bit. You're more upset. You're like, hey, wait a second. Last time you did all this work and you asked for 500. Now you're just doing this little bit and asking for 500. That was the problem with just SaaS management is you come in there and year one, maybe they're spending $8 million on SaaS. And it's like, hey, look, we can save you 20%. So we can save you 1.6 million. Incredible. And we're only going to cost 100K. Okay, totally fine. But then the next year, they're not spending 8, they're spending 8 minus 1.6. Maybe they've spent a little more. Maybe they're spending 7, but there's not as much cleaning up to do. So you can only take them from 7 to maybe 6.8. So you're only saving them 200 grand, but then you're still going to ask them for 100. Or worse, you need a little bit of uplift, right? So you're going to ask them for 110 or 115. And so there was like a big kind of value discrepancy. So this was right when I was coming in, and it was like, how do we expand from the SaaS management piece into something that is a little more sticky, looking at the NRR side of things, and getting more into the security lens of, I say one side of the coin is you have all these extra SaaS licenses that you don't need. Yes, you can save money. The flip side of that coin is there's also a security risk. Imagine if 50 people have left your organization but can still access your financial systems. That's a problem. Not just because you're paying for their software licenses, but because you don't want them to have access to your financial systems. So that was kind of where I came in, and the journey over the last year has been transitioning away from, hey, we help you save money, to more, we help you stay secure and manage all of your identities.
So it started out as like the productization of Doge is what it sounds like,
A little
right? You
bit. Yeah, a
coming
little
in.
bit. Yeah.
So how when you look at the go-to-market frameworks and processes that existed when you got there, what was the reality, and then what did your playbook look like? Like how did you dive in? What's been the impact? Where did you focus?
Yeah. I think it was one of the interesting things is the company had got kind of from 0 to 1 based off a full inbound motion because they weren't here, right? They started during 2020 in India selling into the US. So most of the customers were here in the US, but none of the team was. And so all of the content marketing, SEO, PPC, all of that was based on, hey, we have sellers and GTM teams in India selling into the US, and it was totally fine. If I'm calling you on a Zoom meeting, whether I'm calling you from Boulder or Bangalore, is it really that big of a difference? Not really. And so, but when I started, we were trying to pivot of how can we scale outside of just this inbound channel? And that was things like partnerships and channels and outbound and all those other strategic levers, going in person, doing marketing events, all that type of stuff was really starting to scale up. So we went from basically 100% inbound to now we're officially about 55, 60% outbound and partners, and then about 40% inbound. But we're trying to slowly grow these outbound and partner channels to really kind of diversify the business, de-risk the business a little bit.
And so you've built the entire outbound stack from scratch, basically.
I wouldn't say it was just me. There's been lots of people that have
You've
been a
led
part
you've
of
led
it.
the building of it, right?
But we've been pushing it really hard the last 4 quarters for sure.
And that was your charter, was to basically say, hey, like diversify revenue revenue streams, or like lead gen channels and growth
Yeah, it was
channels.
one of the things we talked about when I was interviewing and talking with the board is like, hey, like this is going to be important for that next chapter of growth for us for sure.
So what's the first thing you do in that situation, right? You're coming into a new organization, new for you,
Yeah.
that has historically delivered growth via a specific channel or motion, and you've got to set up the systems, processes, team to diversify those growth channels. Where do you start?
Yeah. I call it popcorning, and which is like a very corny way of looking at it. But I try to only change one variable. Too many people try to come in and change like 12 things, and then you don't know what's working and what's not working. So if I go and I just like look for your customers, right? When you get there, maybe they have 7 customers, maybe they have 70, maybe they have 700. But I zoom all the way in and I just look at the customers you have. And let's say, for example, one of your early customers that was closed via inbound, great. But one of your early customers was a 2,000 employee financial services company in Orlando, Florida that bought you for XYZ reason. I'm going to go on a map, like a physical map. I'm going to go to Orlando. I'm going to find their office building, and then I'm going to draw like a 10 mile radius circle around it. And I want to find every other 2,000 employee financial services in Orlando and reach out to them about thing XYZ. Because every early startup, they're like, I want brand. You know how expensive buying brand is at an early stage that's only raised even a few million, right? We're not a Gen AI seed startup that raised $60 million seed. Like that's not us. And so you can't just outspend. You're not going to outmarket and outspend OpenAI on marketing budget. It's not going to happen. And so you're kind of thinking of like, hey, how can we narrow down? So I don't need the whole world to know about me, but I want every 2,000 employee financial services company in Orlando to have heard about me. Because then you could start doing everything local there. You can put your outbound efforts there. Your SDR teams can focus there. You can start doing dinners there. You can do events when they come to Orlando, right? All of that stuff focused around there. Then before you know it, everybody there will know who you are. And if you have 7 customers, one's in Orlando, one's in Dallas, Texas, one's in New York City, right? You do that for each one. And like you kind of slowly grow. Then before you know it, you're like, wow, we have 7 customers in financial services that are roughly 2,000 employees in Orlando. Then you change one more variable. So it's like, okay, maybe we go from 2,000 to 5,000, but we'll keep everything else the same. Or maybe we say, hey, financial services is also kind of like healthcare, both highly regulated. So then we go over to healthcare. Right. And so we just focus on changing one of those. Too many times, like, hey, let's go up market, and oh, we can try real estate as well. And so
Everything.
you try to do too many things, and then you're like, it's not working. Well, why isn't it working? You don't know because there's like 15 things that you've changed. So I try to like very slowly ease into it, and I call that kind of popcorning. It works pretty well. Yeah.
So what is maybe based on a percentage basis, what has growth looked like over the last year, and how long did it take to start seeing the results of those initial focus points?
Yeah. So we've been growing about 50% per quarter, which it's been doing well. We've started to see everything because I think one of the challenges of being early is you can have like hero deals that like make or break a quarter and really cover things up. So it's like if you're only doing 400 grand in a quarter, right? Only, okay, that could be a lot of money depending on what you're looking at. But if you're doing 400 grand in a quarter and you have one deal that's like 150K, it could cover up a lot of other kind of warts or things that are not going well just because you had this one big deal. So I kind of subtracted the business and I looked at like, okay, what is our run rate business doing, excluding the big deals? And then what is our big deal business doing? Because some quarters you might have 2 big deals that come through and some you might have 0. And that doesn't mean that quarter was just incredible, right? It doesn't mean you're growing now. Oh, we're growing at 300% quarter over quarter. No. And so I try to look at those a little bit separately. So our kind of core business has been that 50% quarter over quarter. And then big deals is finally something that we're starting to get into a little bit of rhythm, that we know every single quarter we have a pipeline of 1 to 2 that will start to come through, and then hopefully we'll get to 3 to 4. And then so we can kind of look at those a little bit separately. I think we're probably almost to a point where we separate and those become 2 different teams. We're not quite there yet. But that's where you hear people say like, oh, we're going to have a commercial team and an enterprise team. That's kind of from that motion.
Yeah. So when you in at Zluri, as you've gone in and set this up, like what were the first few hires you made? Like how big is the team now? Maybe that's like your go-to-market team.
Yeah. So we have 10 on the GTM side.
Okay.
Yep.
And what roles do they sit in across the team?
Yeah, so we've got seven on the AE side, 3 on the account manager side. So one's new logos, one's focused on cross-sell, upsell, expansion. And then we have 2 people on the channel, right, which are fully part of that is security is very channel driven, but channel partnerships focused. There's 2 full-time folks there. And then we have an SDR team, which is about 10 to 15. And then we got 1 person in field marketing, 2 people in rev ops. Like the other teams are a little bit smaller.
And what do the day-to-day cadences look like? Like as you're going and like one of the things the audience we're trying to articulate for the audience is like what's changed with generative AI? Like how have sales processes changed? How have the motion that you go after changed? Do you feel like the market you're selling into are early adopters or laggards? And how have you structured the team to address that? Like what do the daily cadences look like?
Yeah.
Like really breaking it down.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I would say there's kind of 3 things that jump out that are changing slash could change. I think the biggest kind of massive big difference will be a lot of our users today, a lot of our customers today are humans in IT. I think eventually that could be agents that are working in IT doing some of the things. So that's something we're thinking about from a product roadmap perspective is like, how do we prepare for identities not being human identities, but them being agentic identities? And like NHIs and non-human identities and all that type of stuff is a little buzzwordy right now, but there is that element of how do we make sure that we're positioning the product for that? Because as that becomes more and more common, um, there's also a lot of people that want to
Actually,
understand. Yeah,
Connor,
go ahead.
break that down. Like, because I think like I've started to see that as well. Essentially, what you're saying is like your SaaS product in the future may not be used by a human user. It may be
Yeah.
used by an agent via an MCP, or like help the audience understand what the future is
And I,
looking like.
and I think that completely breaks almost 80% of the pricing models that we have in SaaS of this like price per user. Like, but then again, at the same time, people are like, oh, we're going to do it based on consumption. I don't know how many people want to like let's use the security lens because that's what I've been going. We're going to base it on consumption. So every attack that we block, we're going to charge you. As a CISO, how would you budget for that? Like how would you budget? How many times are you going to get attacked this quarter? I don't know. Like that's like it becomes very difficult to price. So I
Hopefully
think
none,
the
right?
yeah, you would hope the whole pricing and packaging of it, having it be agents versus humans, will completely change. And I don't have any of the answers there. Um, but I think a lot of it has been what people care about and what people are interested in is changing a little bit, like the questions that they're asking. I think it's forcing everybody to get a little bit more technical, which I like. I think a lot of people are trying to wonder what the differences are between all of the different jargon and buzzwords that comes with AI. And I think sometimes people get a little bit too like I'm getting flashbacks to like college philosophy courses where they're just like speaking past each other and you're like, yeah, what? It's like, have you ever had
Yeah,
like 3
more
people that are like
theory.
machine learning engineers that are talking by? It's like, what's the difference between like AI and machine learning and agentic AI? And I'm like, okay, you guys, like we got to simplify this down or you're going to have people that are just very confused. So I still think we're at the early stage of a lot of that. Um, but a lot of things right now, I look at it as if it's something that you do over and over again that could be repeated, that's very data driven, probably an early stage AI workflow that is ready for that. Whether that's you go and create your own GPTs to do it, or whether there's a vendor out there that is doing something like that, that's kind of like either one of those options. Like that's going to be kind of company specific based on your internal bandwidth. Um, But that's kind of where I see the early adoption of a lot of these things.
How have you infused AI into your workflows at Zluri to enhance the sales processes?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple ones. So the first one is kind of at the data layer, right? Because I think a lot of it is junk in, junk out when it comes to AI. So it's making sure that you're using all of the different data sources that you can, pulling them in. Easy examples, most sales orgs are using some type of Gong, Clary, Chorus, some type of call recording tool of sort. And being able to take the data points and the context from those calls and put that into Salesforce so you don't have reps spending manual time doing it. It's an easy thing that reps are spending 15, 20% of their time doing that AI can already get rid of today. So that's kind of a super easy one. Um, Other things that I've had before that I think will change in the future is you used to have basically a RevOps individual for almost every sales leader in the company. So if you have 17 RDs and 3 VPs and 1 CRO, you probably have somewhere between 10 and 20 RevOps professionals that are there to support each one. Part of it was because I think the old school sales leader was not very good at Salesforce and couldn't pull their own data. It's a different problem. Um, but I think there is a lot of that will be changing as it's like, hey, that data we can have, there are agentic options, there are AI options that can facilitate that data like a RevOps person would to allow those RevOps teams to go do other value driving stuff for the business, focus on how we actually grow versus just presenting the data.
How else are you seeing it? Like, what else are you looking at? Where are the biggest opportunities you see?
I think I think the area that I'm trying to figure out the most right now is there's kind of this like I don't know if it's unsaid or if it comes from the venture community or something, but you always hear the 3x, 4x, 5x for OTE to quota ratios for SaaS sellers. I think that's going to break. And I think because you have AI assisted or AI leveraged reps, I think you'll get to a point where can you have 10x? Can you have 20x? Can you have like this wild thing? Um, and I think we can. And so that's what I'm trying to see. Who are the early companies that are able to kind of figure that out and disconnect their scaling from their AE headcount scaling? And so I think that'll turn a lot of things kind of on its head within SaaS. So that's what I'm trying to figure out the most right now is how can we increase the revenue per rep as opposed to just increasing the number of heads?
Do you, as you look at the various growth channels that you've been building over the last year, um, how many do you have concurrently running? So you have inbound, you have outbound. What other channels are you guys driving? Channel. I heard
Yeah.
you say channel.
Yeah. So we look at it as inbound, SDR outbound, AE outbound. So we look at those as two separate outbound
How does
channels.
that differ actually? How are you changing each of those?
Yeah, it's the same motion, but it's two different people, right? If the SDR is setting the meeting on outbound, that would be an SDR outbound. If the AE is setting the meeting, because I still want the AEs doing the cold prospecting, the outbound, right? Whether that's they're on LinkedIn or they're talking with their network or different things like that, I still want that. I think one, it's a good humbling activity so that they're more respectful to the SDR teams. But I also think it's just a very good habit and nature and diversifies your income streams, right? The outbounds in AE sets versus an SDR sets, they're usually a little bit bigger. They usually close a little bit higher, right? There's all of those data driven reasons to say like, hey, the AE knows what they're looking for. They just don't spend as much time looking that we need. So we split those up and we look at those differently.
Do you what do your daily management motions look like as you're building out those and like what are the expected do you have numbers that they're looking to hit every day? Like what's the framework you drive that team around?
I try to stay on the output side of some of the prospecting activities and less the input side, which I know is kind of wrong. There's a lot of people that are like, hey, you can only control the inputs, you can't control the outputs. But in my experience, when I controlled the inputs, everyone felt micromanaged. But when I control the outputs, people don't feel as micromanaged. They feel more empowered to do it their way. The way I say it's like you can use a sniper or a machine gun. I just care that the job gets done. Um, And so like I think there is an element of it lets AEs feel a little bit of their own personality, a little bit of their own confidence to do it their way. And so I've seen good results from that. I've always said I'm looking at the outcome. If the outcome is not what we're expecting, then I get to manage the input. But as long as you're getting the outcome, I'm okay. I'll let you kind of handle the input. But like when it gets into like, hey, we're gonna need to performance manage. It's like, hey, here are the input metrics that we track. Here's what you need to be doing. Um, but as of right now, I look at the outbound side, and so I look at things like like AE outbound opportunities and deal registration. So deal registration is a channel specific metric on working with a channel partner and getting opportunities registered, basically where the channel partner says, hey, this is a good opportunity for Zluri. Here's why it's qualified for XYZ reasons.
So sorry, I interrupted you. You've got outbound SDR, outbound AE channel. You have your
Inbound
inbound channels that
channel
are
events.
okay. And which of those channels is what is producing the best right now for you guys?
So the one that's growing the fastest is our partner channel, right? So that partnerships side of things. And part of that is there's a company called Canalys, which is basically think of like Gartner specifically to the cybersecurity channel, for lack of a better term. Um, and they put out 92 cents out of every dollar of IT and security spend goes through the channel. And so it's like if you're trying to not focus on channel partnerships in general, you're kind of fighting after this 8 cents, this 8%. And so that's something that we've been really focused on over the last kind of year. And it's a long-term game, right? Those are long-term investments that start to pay off. But this last quarter was our best quarter all time, right? We stood it up a year ago, and this last quarter we had 92 deal registrations. So for a company our size, like I felt very, very good about that. And the conversion rates are good. So that's kind of the channel I'm most excited about. I'm also biased. I like that channel. It's a part of security, so like it's very common. But yeah.
So we started the call or the conversation with you talking about what are you've gotten to where you've gotten through a lot of mistakes. Like what's the biggest mistake? Maybe it's not your mistake. Like what's the biggest mistake you've seen revenue leaders make when trying to build the go-to-market and like you don't have to name names of
Yeah.
people, but like
Oh,
getting the
um, I would say usually the first mistake that I made and that a lot of people make is I call it being a super rep. So it's your first management job. And so maybe sometimes startups have a problem because they struggle to attract like the right sales leader. So the first sales leader that a founder will hire will maybe be somebody that was a rep, maybe it was their top rep, and they promote them to be that frontline sales leader for the first time. Um, and that person usually has a lot of the challenges that I call being a super rep. They want to do everything. They're like, hey, I closed this way, so that's how everybody should close. I ran my deals this way. So as a rep, you could handle 20 deals. So when all of a sudden you get a team of 8 reps that each have 20 deals, that one manager is kind of acting as a super rep, is just trying to run 180 deals and they burn out and they're like, why aren't I doing this? My close rate's going down. Like I'm not as good as I thought. And it's like, well, you're just trying to do everything and you're spreading yourself too thin. You become the bottleneck. So I think that is that's a challenge that I experienced when I first became a manager. And I think a lot of people first experience when they step into that kind of first leadership role. Founders experience it the same thing when you try to transition from founder-led sales to having AEs. I always ask founders, I was like, oh, did that AE close the deal or did you close the deal and the AE moved the stages in Salesforce? Those are two different things. It's okay if you got to go through that stage for a little while, but don't think it's like, oh, we have product market fit because our AEs are closing things. Are they or are you? Those are different things. Not a bad thing, but they're just a realization.
So how do you know when to move? Like what are the signals you would look for to move an opportunity like to bring in like a professional sales leader?
Ooh. Like from a founder. So when a founder should hire that kind of first kind of
Yeah.
sales leader, I would say it usually when you're when there's enough time to, because like you'll eventually hit your cap as a founder of how many deals that you can run. And so I always try to say like, what is the next bottleneck? And then as soon as that bottleneck is team management, coaching, scaling, structure, process, that's probably when you bring this person in. So the founders that I think struggle the most are when they bring in that sales leader because the product is not selling, probably not the time to bring in a sales leader. If you bring in that sales leader, um, right? So like I was like as a founder, you start selling, and then I was like, okay, what is the next limitation to scale to the next revenue milestone, whatever that is? It's like, well, I don't have enough leads. Okay, well, your sales leader is not going to solve that. Okay, so maybe that's not a hire there. Maybe that's a hire on the marketing side. Maybe that's an SDR team. Maybe that's some other investment, not the sales leader. And so then I kind of just get to the point. It's like when you're at the point where you're like, look, what's going to get us the next revenue? It's like, I can't manage my reps. I can't do one-on-ones with them. I don't have time to do all this. Okay. That's where I would hire that leader.
So what's the biggest mindset shift that you feel like those who have been doing need to make room for that, right? Like I find that sometimes extremely capable people have a hard time getting out of the way.
Yeah.
Like where do you feel like the biggest unlock is there?
Understanding that different is not wrong. It's just different. Um, because like it's the same kind of thing. Like I joke with my wife. I was like, we both clean. We just clean differently. Right? It's if you ever walked in somebody's house and you
We just
know
clean
it's
better.
yeah, that's a different conversation. Maybe that's a bad analogy. It's the you ever walk in somebody's house and you know it's clean, but they clean with a different scent than you clean, so it doesn't feel clean to you.
Yeah, because you're
Maybe
used to
maybe
it.
you're a yeah, maybe you're a lavender house or maybe you're a lemon house or maybe whatever you are. But you walk into somebody else's house and you could tell they just cleaned, but because they use a different scent, it doesn't feel the same clean as what you're used to. Um, I think that happens a lot with founders of they're like, well, they're running the sales process a little bit differently than I would. But if it's not wrong, if it's not breaking, if the metrics aren't getting worse, maybe let them do it their way a little bit.
What if they're just not moving? Like if they're not moving, where's the first place you go look? Like how do you decide where to look, what to focus on, where to go if you're just not seeing the results you want to?
Yeah. Usually I think that's because people aren't looking at the numbers. And I think even early stage, there's plenty of numbers that can like point you in the right direction. Um, and so I think that comes from maybe your traditional founders don't usually come from a sales background. Usually they come from more of a product or engineering background. Maybe that's just in tech. Um, but so they're not very familiar with Salesforce. And so they don't really know how to pull the data or the numbers. Because like once you know Salesforce, you can manipulate the numbers to kind of tell whatever story you want it to tell. So if you're always relying on somebody else to pull the numbers, you might not get the exact data point that you're looking for. So I think there is an ability to be able to not read the P&L, but read data points and be able to connect the dots. I think that's also an AI use case that can really help some of those founders that aren't as kind of GTM savvy per se. Um, because then you can kind of see along the funnel where things are breaking, right? Maybe you have great top of funnel, but your first meeting to second meeting, you have a huge drop off. Okay, well, we can focus on what's happening one step above. Things kind of start to fall apart. Maybe you do great, but then you don't win POCs. Okay, well, let's look at the POC. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Um, and so like you can kind of, I think it's understanding what your funnel looks like and then understand the drops of like where people are falling out because then you can start focusing on there. And I would say, yes, you could always get better from first meeting to second meeting or second meeting to POC or POC to close, right? You could always get better at those things, but focus on where the biggest bottleneck is first because like you can get your close rate better by 2 or 3%. Great. But if you're losing 80% from first meeting to second meeting, you're going to get a lot more value by fixing that than by fixing your close rate by 2 or 3%.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing, like if one takeaway for sales leaders trying to either enhance or rebuild their go to market processes? Like what's the one thing you'd say will get like the most juice for the squeeze?
Two things, which I know you asked for one, I'll give you two.
Yeah, two's good.
Number one, go visit your customers more or go talk to them, ideally in person. But like if you can't get there in person, if you do have limitations, if there is budget constraints, totally fine. At least go sit down with them. I feel like we don't do that as much as we used to in a post-COVID world. And so I think there's so much insights and kind of context that you can get off like, hey, I think you're using my product for A, B, and C, but you'll actually find out they're using it for X, Y, and Z. So I think that's really important. Go visit your customers more. And then second, usually the team knows where the gaps are. So if you have an AE or two that is experienced, if you have a marketing person that has done this before, any of those types of people, ask them, hey, if you were me, what would you do? If I made you the VP, what would you change? If I made you the CRO, what would you change? And usually they have good ideas, and then that lets you to know where to go and look at that data. I wouldn't say implement their change, but I would say go look at the data point around what they were talking about, and usually they can give you a pretty good context around different things, right? Try to eliminate different variables. So reps like, it's always priced right. Everything's always priced right. If it was free, what would happen, right? So I think I try to isolate the variable, but talking to your team can point you in the right direction. So talking to your customers can make sure you're building the right thing, and talking to your team could really help you know where along this funnel things are breaking, because usually your team knows.
Actually, here's a great question for you. What's the biggest excuse you hear that's like from reps from teams that's just total nonsense? Like you hear it all the time, but it's like it's a false flag or it indicates something different.
Price. I think price is always kind of the biggest scam out there. Everyone knows, specifically at a startup, your price is very fluid. So if you're losing 80% of your deals to price, you're not. It's just like an easy out. Every buyer knows. They're like, I just tell them it's too expensive, and it's like I always look like, hey, buying a Porsche and buying a Prius are two different things. They're still buying a car, but like no one would say those are the same car. So yeah, price is always going to be different. So like whenever someone says price, I'm like, okay, get rid of that, right?
What do you dig in on when you hear it when you hear that?
It depends on if I'm hearing it from one of my reps or if I'm hearing it from a prospect. Maybe from a prospect, I'm like, okay, cool. Like let's say it was free, or let's say it was half of what it was. Um, then what would be the hesitation, right? And then they'd be like, okay, well, this, that, and the other. I was like, well, what if we didn't, right? What if we paid at the end of 12 months as opposed to now, right? Like there's a bunch of different ways that you can poise it to try to like neutralize that point, and then you can hear from a prospect of like actually what's happening. If I'm hearing it from a rep, usually it's, well, did you ever talk to me about like lowering the price? Right? If you're telling me we lost a deal because of price, but you've never come to me and like begged for a lower price, then like it's also kind of a problem. So it usually just tells me that like you just weren't diligent enough, like you didn't like actually understand the opportunity. Because most companies aren't trying to just like overprice their product. Every founder is like, hey, you can win the deal at 40 or you lose it at 50. Most of them would say, okay, I'll win it at 40. Right? Like most founders aren't going to walk away from money just to walk away. Now they're not going to give it for free, so they have like no margins. Like totally get it, but like within reason.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I think the stage two, your goals are you getting product feedback? Are you like revenue is great. We all like revenue, but what else can we get from those
Totally.
relationships? So
Totally. Marketing advantages, right? It's like, hey, will you do a roundtable dinner with us? Will you hop on a webinar with us? Right? All of those types of things can have so much more value than an extra 5 or 10 grand on a contract.
100%. Awesome. Connor, thank you. If this helped you rewire how you think about go-to-market, partners, or pipeline, click the follow, leave a review, and send this to your revenue team. That's it for Revenue Unplugged. We'll see you next time.